Are we live? Okay.
It's live on the screen.
Okay, we'll call a meeting to order. First order of business is roll call. Diana?
Representative Andrew,
Here.
Representative Brown,
Excused?
Representative Connolly, Representative Harshman, Representative Nyman,
Here.
Representative Newsom, Representative Obermueller,
Here.
Representative Summers,
Here.
Chairman Paxton.
Here. Welcome, everyone. A special welcome to our new Superintendent of Public Instruction, Mr. Schroeder, Superintendent Schroeder. If you'd like to address the group and have any words for us, that'd be fine. I don't want to put any pressure on you, but give you the opportunity if you'd like to have a few words with the committee. You can come forward and where we have the mic so they can hear you streaming.
Mr. Chairman, it's good to be here. It's an honor. Thank you all for the work that you do. I look forward to working with you all in the future. And I'm just here to observe and learn. I'll defer to my staff for any expertise at this point, but I met several of you already. And again, it's an honor to be here. Thank you for the good work that you do for the state of Wyoming. Much appreciated. Keep up the good work.
Well, thank you very much. Okay, I guess the first item of business that we have is take into consideration House Bill 29. And Representative Summers, would you like to summarize this bill for us?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And Mr. Chairman, this is House Bill 29, Hathaway Scholarship Amendments. And Mr. Chairman, the House Bill 29 allows working students to take less than six hours per semester and still remain eligible for the Hathaway. The bill modernizes the expenditure and reserve account by merging them, by allowing an investment in Pool A, and by fixing a timing issue with the payout of the Hathaway. And Mr. Chairman, the Hathaway corpus has been growing, and House Bill 29 provides a slight increase in the Hathaway scholarship amounts. And we can go into more detail, Mr. Chairman, when we get into the bill.
Okay, thank you. Any comments or questions from the committee? All right. What's your pleasure? Well, we better get public comment first, I guess, hadn't we? Do we have any public comment on the bill?
We have the treasurer guy second.
Please introduce yourself. Tell us who you represent.
Mr. Chairman, I'm Kari Akins. I'm the Chief Policy Officer at the Wyoming Department of Education. I have with me Bradley Barker. He's a Hathaway Scholarship Consultant at the Department of Education. I don't know that we have anything to add because the committee did very good work on this topic during the interim, but wanted to make sure that if anyone has any questions for the department, they have that opportunity.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And I'm pretty sure Representative Harshman has these numbers, but can you give us what is in the corpus of the Hathaway, if you know what that is, and how much has it grown over the last decade, if you have any of that information?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, I actually have not looked at that most recently, but we do know, of course, that it started out as the 400 million, and I believe it is nearing, if not over the 700 million mark right now.
Correct, Mr. Chairman. I think
Representative Harshman, do you have some numbers?
Yeah, and in November it was like 698 million market value, so it's probably over 700. Started at 400.
Second.
Yeah. That's correct? Okay, thank you. All right, questions from the committee? All right, thank you. Anyone else wish to testify? Yes, please come forward.
Hello, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Lisa Johnson, representing the Wyoming Association for Career and Technical Education. We just want to be on the record in support of this bill, and specifically because it does provide more flexibility for students and the satisfactory academic progress. It would help in cases where there's an apprenticeship, where a student is working on that apprenticeship at a full-time working full-time and then taking the classes. And so this amendment will help them to be able to be eligible for halfway on the college credit part of the apprenticeship.
Okay, questions from the committee, comments from the committee? All right, thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Anyone else like to testify?
Want to get Sackett up here? Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Sackett, did you have any comments you'd like to make?
I'll ask him the same question, Mr. Chairman. Let
Okay.
him bring his little book up here and tell us what's in that account.
All right, that sounds like a good plan. Welcome to the committee.
Mike.
Is your mic turned on?
It is. Yeah, there we go.
Okay.
A little closer. Chairman, members of the committee, Matt Seigel, the treasurer's office. Yeah, Representative Harshman's correct. Balances around 700 million in fair market value. Last month or so has maybe been not a great investment month, but
Okay, questions?
Chairman. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you. So Mr. Sackett, obviously, we're increasing the, scholarship amount slightly. And that's why I kind of ask, what's our trend, so like last 5 years or whatever, what have we gone from with a corpus value to where are we at now? And it would seem that this is a fairly small bump, that we're okay. So I'm just kind of trying to understand what your thoughts are and where our trend is at.
good question, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. We have been trending up, past performance isn't an indication of future performance. We have dumped, tipped into the corpus a number of years, and I don't know off the top of my head. We did dump around 13.8 million into the corpus this last year. I think, in the last 5, we've dumped in probably several of those years, tipped into the corpus. A 5% increase seems reasonable, and allowing the reserve account to grow from 4.5% to 9%, gives you that extra cushion within the reserve account.
Mr. Chairman.
Follow up?
Mr. Chairman, this is stuff I should know, or we might have heard, and Representative Harshman should probably know. So we tipped 13 million. Do we know what this bump would, if we were to estimate based upon the previous year's history of the Hathaway, would we have any guess? Obviously this is a percentage bump from what we've had. So we spent X number. Tell me what we spent last year in the Hathaway, and then what this projected bump would be if we used the previous year's as a base, so we can tell the folks on the floor what's going on.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, the Department of Ed might actually be better at answering that question. Generally, the scholarships have ranged, I think, from around 17 to 18 million dollars a year. According to the fiscal note, it looks like the increase would be around $850,000 per year. But I'd defer probably to the Department of Ed if they have any corrections to my statements or
I see Kari back there shaking her head up and down, so looks like we're in agreement.
Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Okay, any other questions from the committee?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, go ahead.
just on the other question will be about, well, why are you going from 4.5% to 9%, and what is that? And going to one account. And here's how I want to say it, and you correct me. Is it okay if I practice and because we're going to all need to explain this on the floor. So the 4.5% is roughly 25 million bucks right now of the 5-year rolling average. And to take that to 9% then doubles that to about 50 million, a little over 50 million in my head. the issue really, because we've had people say, well, the Hathaway is going broke. We have to pull money back from the reserve account to pay our bills out of the expenditure account. And really, in my mind, it's a timing issue, the way we set the law. We either need to currently we say everything in the expenditure account sweeps at the end of the fiscal year, June 30th. And then everything over the size of the reserve, everything over the 4.5% also sweeps to the corpus. And so then that's all sweeps on July 1st, June 30th, and then we have to pay bills in August. And so now the expenditure account's empty. And so we say, well, we have to go into the reserve account and pull it back. We just moved it out. Now we got to pull it back 30 days later. And then because the income that comes is throughout the year as you make investments and you realize gains or whatever. And so it's really this timing issue. And so going to one account, does your office support that? You think that's a better way to manage this instead of this right pocket, left pocket? I've heard you use that analogy. So with that, Mr. Chairman, if you just comment on some of that.
Chairman Paxton, Representative Harshman, that correct. We can effectuate the sweep if there's too much in the expenditure account just as easily as we could the reserve account. So this end of fiscal year timing where we sweep it all to the reserve account. And then, as Representative Harshman said, we have to basically go back to the expenditure account to make payments. Isn't really necessary because the reserve account basically is just to calculate what the tip into the corpus is. And that's about the only real reason that it exists, because everything else is done out of the expenditure account. The expenditure account, we can see if it's over 4.5% of the corpus and make the sweep from the expenditure account to the corpus just as easily. So there's no real reason for both accounts.
Representative Summers.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And obviously, we're going to, the way this bill has it, we're going to invest in Pool A. So we would be liquid enough. We don't have to worry about that because we're pulling money in, pulling money out. The 9% gives us cushion. So it's not like, you still have more flexibility within Pool A, but Pool A is liquid enough, right? We're not going to run into any problems with our payouts being invested in Pool A.
Chairman, Representative Summers, yes. So the bill allows us to invest a portion into Pool A, and this would really be dependent on a number of factors. Our estimated yield helps kind of cover our expected, payments. With an increase in scholarships of say 150,000 or $1 million. We might have a new target of what that estimated expenditure is. But as we grow that 4.5% to the 9%, we're increasing it up, as Representative Harshman said, to 52 million. When we start getting into that 30 million range, CIO Patrick Fleming, would have the discretion to start investing, say half of that. Maybe we're putting 15 million into the Pool A, but that would be dependent probably on a number of things, including expenditure, results from an increase, expected yields maybe going up as interest rates maybe go up, and some of our other alternative investments are expecting to start rolling with some higher yields. That yield helps cover some of our income for the year. So I had written down about 12.5 million is kind of our expected interest and income dividends for a year, saying about 2% on, that on the corpus. So that helps cover the expenditures, and that gives us a little more cushion on what we could put into Pool A. But it would probably depend on a few years down the road, further look at that.
Representative Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think that's important for all of us because we're going to hear that question. You're going to reduce investment income, right? And we had that in our committee earlier, the joint committee. And so that'll be a question on the floor. And then I think the other part in my mind, and I'm practicing again on you, and so we all can correct this, but if you had a couple of years of zero returns, Great Depression stuff, and we have a full reserve account, we've got a couple of years, 2.5 years of payouts. If we go with Craig dividends and interest, as you talked about, this really increases that to about 7 years. if we just get our 2% or 2.25% is the way my math works. So by increasing this reserve, but again, with that flexibility to put in an M&A to negate any potential lost opportunities. That's how I see it. If I'm explaining that in an understandable way, Mr. Chairman, but those are going to be the issues I think on the floor.
Okay, anything else from the committee? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Do we have anyone else that would like to testify on the bill? Do we have anyone else online? No one else online. Okay, committee,
Move the bill.
moved by Summers, seconded by Harshman. We're ready for discussion. You want to go through the bill page by page? I suppose we ought to, huh?
So if anybody has any amendments, thumbs up.
See if there's any amendments as we go. All right, let's just start with page one. Is there any comments, questions, or amendments on page one? All right, page two. Page three. Page four. Page five. Page six. Page seven. Page eight. Anything on page nine? Page 10. 11. Page 12. Last page 13. Okay, any other comments, questions?
Question on the bill.
Question has been called. Roll call.
Okay, Representative Andrew,
Aye.
Representative Connolly.
Aye.
Representative Harshman.
Aye.
Representative Nyman.
Aye.
Representative Newsom. Representative Overmuller. Representative Summers.
Aye.
Chairman Paxton.
Aye. Who would like to volunteer to floor manage this bill? I would say one of you two guys sitting to my left.
I'll do it and then get back up.
Okay, sounds good. All right, next bill for our consideration is House Bill 30. And I think we'll ask Representative Summers, Majority Floor Leader Summers to summarize this bill for us.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And this is House Bill 30, School Finance, Increasing Cash Reserves. And Mr. Chairman, House Bill 30 allows districts to increase their reserves from 15 to 30% for 4 years. Then the reserve reverts back to 15%. This bill will allow districts to save money from the ARPA infusion and then bleed it out over 4 years. This bill also helps recapture districts like mine deal with the fallout from the passage of the yearly ad valorem bill, which has caused some challenges for business managers in those districts. So, Mr. Chairman, that's basically it. It increases the reserve for a short period of time, then pulls it back in.
Okay. Pretty straightforward bill. Is there any questions or comments from the committee? Okay, anyone from the audience like to testify? Public testimony is open. Go
Good
ahead.
afternoon, Chairman Paxton, members of the committee, Trent Carroll, Chief Operations Officer, WDE. We just wanted to voice our support for the bill. Appreciate the consideration over the interim, the work on it. We have heard from several school districts that are also in favor of this through our School Finance Data Advisory Committee. And as Representative Summers said, we believe that this bill will provide some additional flexibility that will be very useful for districts during this time of additional federal funds through the ESSER iterations and some other tranches of COVID relief funds that districts have received. Allow districts to use their block grant money wisely without that lower limitation on their cash reserves each year. So just wanted to voice our support and stand for any questions.
Questions from the committee?
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman and Trent, thank you. And it's not so much a question, but just kind of a request back at you. I know both of my school districts are in Sublet are recapture districts, and they both have concerns about the play out of basically they're going to be required to become a CREG and forecast revenues. And so what I ask for you is maybe the department ought to check into that, see how big an issue it is, big a problem, and then maybe present back to this committee, or at least to me, what some solutions are long-term if we need to do that, or if this is going to be a very short-term challenge, basically the first year. We just need to get those districts through that period of time. And there's a couple of ways to do it in statute if we want to go in there and do that. But if you guys would look into that, that would help me to evaluate that. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman and Representative Summers, we have been working on that and we are discussing some ideas, and we will continue to do that and report back to you.
Okay, thank you. Any other? Yes, Representative Conley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Carroll, could you just verify for the committee and the public that there are rules that are associated with the federal money that goes directly to the districts that include that we're not, as a state, able to reduce the money that we have provided to the districts in previous years? Could you just talk a little bit about that? Because I think we'll get that question on the floor.
Mr. Chairman and Representative Connolly, you are correct. We do have some requirements that came along with those federal funds. So we have a maintenance of effort requirement. And then we also have what's called maintenance of equity, which is something that's new under the ARP Act. And we've been doing a lot of work on both of those pieces over the last year plus. And we're still actually working through some issues on our maintenance of effort. The U.S. Department of Education continues to provide updated guidance. We just received some new information a little over a week ago that may significantly change our calculation of maintenance of effort for the first year, fiscal year 20. So we're exploring that. We've had some calls with them over the last week. So it's an ongoing process, but Representative Connolly, you are correct. There are some requirements that we need to be mindful of at both the state level and the district level.
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Summers.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And I know you're in contact with the Appropriations Committee probably on this, but obviously if there needs to be some infusion of money to maintain our maintenance of equity or effort, we need to figure out what that is and get that, if possible, before the legislature and the budget, before the budgets go through.
Yep. Mr. Chairman and Representative Summers, we have been working on that. Our hope at this point is that we will be eligible either for a waiver for fiscal year 20 for our maintenance of effort, and therefore we wouldn't need to request an appropriation, or better yet, maybe under this updated guidance, we may not even have a deficit because they've essentially allowed states to include in the calculation for maintenance of effort some of the discretionary funds that the states received under the coronavirus relief fund. That was the 1.25 billion under the CARES Act. And so that's brand new. It does change a lot, and we need to crunch some numbers again, maybe look at a different federal or different reporting period, because they allow us to use either the state fiscal year or federal fiscal year. So we're exploring all options. If we can find a way to wipe out any kind of deficit, that would be our go-to. And then if not, we would submit a waiver request. So I don't know if the timing will allow for a request this session, if there is a deficit, because I expect it'll probably be a number of weeks yet before we have a resolution there. But we will have time to submit a request next session. And of course, during the interim, could communicate anything with you that we know about as we go.
Thank you. Other questions? Okay, thank you for your testimony. Anyone else like to testify? Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jed Ciccarelli, Finance Director with Laramie County School District 1. I'll do my best to be brief, but did want to provide a little bit of context on the importance of cash reserves as a fiscal management tool for school districts in particular. Certainly, there's some intuitive uses of those reserves, whether it's working with our Board of Trustees to present balanced budgets or address unanticipated costs or fluctuations in state funding. Perhaps one of the biggest demands on a school district is the cash flowing of operations. Now, there's a lot of technical details and nuances when it comes into how that calculation of the current 15% reserve works, but essentially what it represents is a snapshot in time of what is determined to be legally restricted based on accounting definitions of that legal restriction. Now, to put a little bit of context around that, that 15% represents roughly 7 weeks of operating expenditures for a school district. For a school district like mine, our average weekly spend is anywhere from $4 to $5 million, even more when you consider other operating funds like nutrition services and federal grants. So additionally, Mr. Chairman, like many local governments, we do experience lean periods between state entitlement payments and local ad valorem tax collections. And to Representative Summers' comments earlier, this is of particular importance with the changes in the ad valorem taxes and how we're going to navigate not only the short-term impact of Senate File 60, but also the long-term impact over the next 14 years. And again, as Representative Summers alluded to earlier, my colleagues in recapture districts would argue that's even more of an importance for their operations. Now, Mr. Chairman, raising the reserve limit would also help school district navigate the use of those emergency relief funds that Representative Summers mentioned earlier. Speaking for my school district, we're very cautious on how we allocate CARES funds, knowing that the transition when those funds expire is going to require very, very specific and careful planning as we move into September of 2024, when those funds do ultimately expire. I also wanted to just mention that with the use of those federal grants and relief funds, it creates pressures on our general fund operating reserves. So to put that again a little bit into context, we as a school district have to expense our federal funds and then ask for reimbursement. Granted, there are multiple opportunities for school districts to draw those funds from the Wyoming Department of Education, but inevitably there's going to be a lag between the time we expense those funds and then till the time we receive those revenues back into our account. So what that requires is our general fund to cash flow, in many instances, our federal grants fund. Even on normal years, my district in particular will expense more than $20 million in federal grants. That puts the pressure on our general fund in the way of interfund loans to those grant funds. As a matter of kind of practice, we've had to float our federal grants fund $2 million on any given point just to be able to cash flow those operations. And we're experiencing a significant increase as we start to expend the ESSER and ARP funds, and that'll continue at least until September 24 when those funds expired. So, Mr. Chairman, just a couple of notes just regarding kind of the importance of as reserves are a very important fiscal management tool for school districts, and be happy to address any questions.
Okay, questions from the committee? Representative Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Ciccarelli. When I read I think it was December 16th letter from the Secretary of Education on uses of the funds, are there any, I guess as the largest school district in the state, obviously it's very clear that the legislature cannot, will not, should not tell you how to use those funds, right? And I just want to, and maybe it's a question without an answer right now, but I guess as you look at expending those and they're one-time funds or these next few years, and is there a concern? Because sometimes you get it both ways from the legislature. Oh, they got all this money. We don't need to fund them any more money. We don't need to grant the ECA. And then when you do spend the money to hire more teachers or whatever it might be, oh, look, they just got all this money and they're just spending it. And so you kind of get it on both ends, I don't know. Is that a real it's kind of a hard question for you, but I guess I want us to present the message that hey, we want you to use those funds. We know it's challenging workforce. Can't get bus drivers, right? You can't get custodians and there's not teachers lining up to do this thing and substitute teachers. And so when you read the secretary's letter from December, it says use that to enhance your workforce and to get, to improve your workforce. And so I just don't want to get you guys caught in this thing where then we have legislators, leaders saying, oh man, they got all kinds, they're just blowing that money, Is there some concern about that, or is there something we can do to kind of help with that, I guess?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Harshman, absolutely. As we, as school districts, work with stakeholders to develop the kind of the spending plan that's associated with the use of these funds, we are very hypersensitive to the fact that we have to avoid recurring expenses. So put it simply, every time we make a decision on how we utilize these funds, we have to think about what does that mean when these funds are gone. To bring it back to Representative Harshman, your comments on the ECA, that's a particular concern of school districts because it's a situation where, like many of us here today, are experiencing inflationary pressures, whether it's on supply chain for our operations or our personnel. 7% inflation, as you guys know, is a difficult pressure to address with staff when the ability for the district to provide sustained increases to salary levels is limited by the time limited nature of these funds. We really have to look at alternative funding sources that are sustainable, funding model allocations in order to do some more sustained impacts to our workforce and stabilize them. These funds we receive as emergency relief, and we have to treat that as emergency relief. And so we look at it from kind of the view that we have to manage those in a way that we're going to mitigate what the transition looks like at the end of the term of those funds. So Mr. Chairman, Representative Harshman, more directly to your question, the way that can be helped or addressed is eliminating restrictions like the cash reserve is certainly one of those that does influence the way districts plan and utilize those resources because we have to deal with those pressures on our general fund operations. Looking at more sustainable revenue sources, specifically to the ECA, for us to be able to provide those sustained adjustments to cost of living increases and those factors that are influencing our operations. Even on the non-personnel side, Mr. Chairman, I tell you that we're experiencing unprecedented increases in costs. Nutrition services, I mean, we're seeing 50, 60% cost increases in just general operating supplies. And so we have to be able to plan on, cumulative adjustments to our funding mechanism to meet those needs.
Yes, go ahead.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'm not a teacher, but I can be more direct. So one of the reasons we hear that perhaps some members of the legislature don't want an ECA is you got a ton of money, so you can pay teachers more. So is districts in general going to pay some teachers some bonus salaries with that money, or is it going to get squirreled away into other parts of the system? And really, will teachers benefit from these federal dollars at the local level, or will they not?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Summers, our first and foremost concern is making sure that we're addressing the instructional loss of students, whether that means additional supports for academic interventions or addressing the social and emotional learning needs of students. With that, there are opportunities for the districts to utilize those funds to help support and retain and attract staff. Similar to my comments earlier about supply chain shortages, the staffing shortages are impacting us in every aspect of school district operations. So we do have the opportunity to utilize some of those funds for compensation. However, those funds are only going to be available to us for a short amount of time. So what we do now, we have to make sure isn't going to create a long-term liability for a school district if we don't have a source of funding to, in a sense, backfill in those decisions.
I see your hand up, Representative Conley.
I'll wait till the end.
Okay. Anyone else? Yes, Representative Harshman.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think, words matter. And I think I want to say that I think what was said in the secretary's letter on December 16th is really important. And we don't want Wyoming, and you're the largest school district in the state. We don't want you running scared of the future that we're going to somehow, we're going to still educate children 4 years from now when the ARP money's gone. And we're going to do it at a really good level like we've done. We're going to do a great job. And this learning loss thing is a huge deal. You're a first grader, you don't get those 3 months back. You know, it's over. And then you have this next year with all these face masks and different stuff going on. It's going to be a little recovery. And I think so we want to do the right thing on there. And I think it's important for us to send a signal to school districts, do the right thing and get this going. And don't worry about, you know, any political talk during an election season. It'll get done the right way. And our Constitution requires it. And I think members will do it and do the right thing. And so that's the message I want to send today. And that's just one legislator, but I think it's important because words matter. And, you know, to not be out there with that, all that talk, oh, truckloads of money and blah, 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 wasting money, principal salaries and all these things that are distractions. And so we got to get these kids caught up, bottom line.
Okay, anyone else? Yes, Representative Nyman.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you being here. But to add to that, speaking from the standpoint of the folks that I talk to too, a large influx of money coming in, there bears a tremendous amount of responsibility. The folks that I talk to also want to have the opportunity to know that those dollars are going to be managed well. And then the hope that maybe we can avoid some other pressures on our taxpayers in this state through the shall we say, efficient and wise use of those dollars. And so on. I remember testimony at some of the meetings previous to this interim, they were encouraging, like what you just said, let's try not to do things that are going to down the road create something that's going to have to be continued to be sustained. And so I appreciate your testimony, sir, and that you guys are diligently working to find ways to be able to put this money to good use that is going to be long-term investment in what you're doing in your facilities and not create a situation where we're going to have more money necessary for something that was created by an influx of money here that we didn't anticipate. So that's the hope. I'll be quite frank with you. I got folks that are not particularly impressed and I appreciate the representative's words on this is, you know, hey, you guys are just polluted with money. I support this because I want to reward your ability to be able to be efficient operators and put money away and utilize it when it's timely and to help to take the pressure off. As a business owner and a rancher, that's what I do. If I have an influx, I pay off debt and I put some away for a rainy day, which we have an account that we utilize quite frequently. And we don't know how often this is going to come back. So I appreciate your testimony that you're going to be very frugal and efficient with this and help the taxpayers of this state that, hey, we may not have to come back here and add some more money because you guys have been good stewards of what you've gotten. So I appreciate that.
Okay, anyone else? Yes, Representative Conley.
Chairman, poor Mr. Ciccarelli, you're sitting here where you get to just kind of nod your head and say, I agree. And I just want to follow along with colleagues on this committee, but go in a slightly different direction. And that is that the influx of money is desperately needed to take care of things like the good former speaker brought up in terms of catching kids up. And what does that mean? And you brought up social emotional learning, all of those kinds of issues. But I also see it as, honestly, the ability to have a natural experiment, right? We can look at what happened before, we can look at what happened with the money, and then what happened afterwards. And I don't want to lose, honestly, what is discovered in the districts like yours and all of the rest of them about a influx of money that was used as an experiment, if you will, and it worked. And that is something that we should replicate. If the money is needed, our committee needs to know about it. I don't want that program to just go away because the federal money isn't there anymore. I want to know what is working for outcomes for the benefit of our kids. And it's our job to figure out how to sustain it, whether it be through recalibration, the next recalibration, or whatever. But I want to know what the districts are doing that's working so that we can continue it, not just have it go away. So I wouldn't be afraid of thinking about good programs needing to go away and therefore not doing them or stopping them. I don't want you to do that. I want you to do I want you to come back to us and say, this really worked. Don't you agree?
You were going to throw that in at the very end. Okay, anyone else? Questions, comments? Thank you, Jed. All right, anyone else like to testify? Janine. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I just want to bring a very different perspective on some of the impacts that it's had on our community, particularly with COVID. First of all, we saw an influx of folks from California, New York, places like that wanted to get away from COVID and move to Jackson. That has continued to drive housing costs up astronomically. 20% of the funds we're getting, we're using for learning recovery. We have hired teachers on 2-year contracts for that very purpose, for learning recovery. With all of the influx of money that we have in our community, i.e. income, we had to significantly raise the salaries, as Jed mentioned, getting help for food service, bus drivers, paras has been very, very challenging for us, and we've had to increase pays. At the present time, we have a cutoff point, and at the present time, we're sitting on 25 resignations. And those are resignations that if you don't provide by the 1st of February, we will not buy back your sick time. We anticipate we'll get another 25 resignations between now and when contracts are due back. That's 50 teachers gone. It costs us about $10,000 per teacher for onboarding, professional development, and all that stuff to be able to acclimate them into the system. That's a huge cost. Our community is extremely sensitive about the issue of masks and vaccines and all of that good stuff. We have had to hire several nurses to be able to deal with all of the data crunching associated with that in terms of what are the active cases in our schools, what's happening, because the Department of Health just doesn't do it. So I am happy to provide you, we do a week or a monthly update on our monies, because there's several different categories if you remember. And I'm happy to provide you with one of our monthly updates in terms of what we spend the money on. But I truly support increasing the reserves, but I honestly don't think we're going to have all that much to put into it, because most of the money that we've received, we've had to spend on COVID relief stuff. So I was very disappointed, candidly, when Representative Schwartz got cut off after making the motion in appropriations, after he got cut off on materials and utilities. And they didn't want to hear about the need for salaries. So I just encourage, and if you look at what's happening, I would suggest to you not to be too political, but our economy on the federal level is a mess. And I think, as we continue to see the inflation that we're seeing, I would really hope that you all reconsider adjustments to salaries as part of the external cost adjustment. I thank you.
Okay, comments or questions from the committee? Yes, Representative Nyman.
Ms. Taskey, just curiously, what is causing all the resignations?
Stress, can't find a place to live. The rent for, if you're lucky, you can find an efficiency for $1,800 a month. And people just, with the stress of it all and the stress of all that's going on in the classrooms with masks, mandates, and vaccines, and, kids getting sick and all of that, they're just tired of it. They're just thinking that there's got to be a better way to live than to live under the constant stress of it all every day. It's kind of sad.
I think every district has some unique characteristics that really have been challenging during the last couple of years. And certainly we hear from every school district the difficulty in hiring and retaining teachers. And I would hope that we could take that topic up during the interim and really do some in-depth discussion about that, see if we have some solutions out there. I know some of our districts have gotten really creative on being able to to provide some opportunities for our kids teachers, young teachers especially, to stay on, and certainly a difficult time to try to recruit teachers also.
Mr. Chairman, you are so right. And if you look at things on a national basis, one of the things that, all the publications that come into my email and stuff, teacher shortages are real. National teacher shortages are real. They're here to stay for a while. So we better start figuring out what do we need to do to attract these folks into the profession and try and keep them there.
Well, there's always been some difficulty to recruit certain teachers to districts, especially the small school districts like I've resided in. But ordinarily you have a number of applicants for elementary jobs. And now we're even seeing that a real shortage of applications for elementary teachers. So I don't know what the answer is, but certainly there's a problem out there that we need to address during the interim.
So to answer the question on bonuses, what we did as part of the COVID money is we offer teachers a $250 wellness opportunity. They have to provide the receipts to the district to get paid for activities that they believe will help with their wellness. We did not give bonuses.
Okay, other questions, comments from the committee? Right, anyone else? Mr. Farmer. Welcome.
Mr. Chairman, Brian Farmer, Wyoming School Boards Association. You've had a lot of great discussion, and I will try not to repeat, I think, what have been some very good points, very good discussion. Speaking in support of the bill, but I want to take a little bit of an aside to tell you I had a conversation recently with a member of mine, a school board member from the western side of the state who's a CPA. And he said, why would you support this bill? Well, this seems like it's not good business. As a CPA, he said, I just can't support this kind of artificial cap. Why would we have a 15% cap on operating a business? That's less than 2 months for operating the business. And certainly the state carries higher than that. The state carries above 30% in its savings. And his fear was that by sunsetting this, by sunsetting the increase in the cap, that what we were doing is we were bottlenecking dollars, that we were bottlenecking funds, and a concern that it may not be long enough, that maybe we do need to look at a longer sunset period on this as we move our way through expenditure of funds. Certainly, there are dollars that are influxed from federal funds. There are state dollars that will be offset by the expenditure of federal funds. But I think if our concern is about the wise and the prudent use of dollars, then we do have to think about it for the long game. When you buy a computer, you don't just go out and buy a computer today when you're a school district. You think about a plan. What is our plan for purchasing technology? When we purchase technology, what is the replacement cost of that technology? And so they do need that time to lay it out and think ahead. So Mr. Ciccarelli talked to you just about the operational needs, that you need those dollars to cover operations of the districts during times where state dollars aren't coming in. So you're covering between the entitlement payments, you're covering for these recapture districts as they try to guess what kind of revenue they're going to get from the taxpayers in their county, really the mineral interests in the county. And I think the fear was that maybe what we do need to do is just look at moving this up without a sunset. Now, I understand that we've had long conversations over this, over the interim, and my hope is that we look at this as an experiment, that in these next 4 years, we decide what is an appropriate cap for school districts to have on their carryover of funds. What does it take to run a good business to ensure that we have those reserves for operational needs that we have those reserves for long-term planning so that we're not just spending money today because we have that money today and we're not thinking about that long-term picture of how we can best serve the needs of the district over a period of time. The other reason that my friend from the western side of the state, the school board member, had a little concern about the bill, and I believe he misread it. His thought was that the limitation on expenditures for capital construction applied to any reserve. And I told him my understanding is that you're talking about that portion of the reserve above the 15%. So in our 48 school districts today, we have very different practices based on local need as to how to utilize that carryover, that 15% reserve. It's going to look different in a small county than a big county. It's going to look different in a mineral county than an entitlement county. And so I think we just have to understand that the way we spend those dollars will look a little different from county to county. But Representative Conley, this idea of experiments, wow, what a great way to look at it. This is an opportunity to experiment and see what is a best way of running our schools to be fiscally prudent and to make sure that we're using those dollars in the best interests over the long term to leverage the dollars that we have. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I certainly support this bill. Look forward to continuing discussions on the issue and know that this is really important to school districts across Wyoming because in its absence, those that want to argue with, oh, this isn't a good idea, talk about the absence. What is the alternative? If this does not pass, then districts will be forced to spend those dollars right now. Dollars are still coming in. They're still coming in. So how do we utilize those dollars? Do we spend it all right now because we've got it? Or do we use prudence and we think about the long term of how we manage these funds for the best of the state of Wyoming and for the best of the school children of the state of Wyoming? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Yes, Representative Nyman.
Mr. Farmer, I really appreciate what you just said right there at the end, because you hit a chord that I have struggled with for a long time, is that we reward, how do you even say it? If you don't spend it, you lose it. And that is counter opposite of what any good business does. But the problem is there's this continual knowledge of knowing that there's going to be more coming next year. And so I agree with you. I wish districts or anybody would be able to, if they're good, like I said before, if they're good managers and efficient, then they should have that opportunity to be able to utilize those dollars and store them and use them on things down the road. Any business looks for those opportunities because you don't know what's coming. For me, especially, and many around here, I don't know if the cow market's going to be next year. So I've got to be very efficient. And I think it teaches a lot of different agencies, just the country in general, the wrong method of looking at this dollars is that if we don't spend it, somebody else will. They're going to take it away from us. And that just breeds inefficiency and that breeds wasteful spending. And so I appreciate your last statement and that it would help all of us to recognize that there's a limit to the amount of dollars out there. And when we get them, let's use them wisely because we don't know what tomorrow holds. So I appreciate that statement. Thank you, sir.
Okay, anyone else? All right, thank you. Anyone else like to testify? Going once, going twice. Do we have anyone online? No one online? Okay, we will close public testimony. Committee, what's your pleasure? Bill's moved by Conley, seconded by Newsom. All right. We'll go through the bill page by page. Shouldn't take too long. It's pretty short. All right. Any questions or comments or changes on page 1? Page 2. Page 3. Page 4. Okay. Any general comments or final comments? What's your pleasure? Questions been called? Roll call vote, please.
Okay, Representative Andrew. Representative Connolly. Representative Harshman. Representative Nyman. Representative Newsom. Representative Overmuller. Representative Summers. Chairman Paxton.
Aye. Okay, committee, any further business to come before the group? I think I've talked to most of you about our dates on the interim thing, and I think I've shown you kind of a tentative calendar that we have. If you have any other input or questions about that, I'd appreciate it. And you have any suggestions for interim topics, let me know. All right, with that, the meeting is adjourned.